Hi folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. Will the Civil War start here in my home state of Missouri? I don't know, but there's an interesting bill that just passed the Missouri State Legislature. I believe it was yesterday as of the making of this video. And I think it has the makings of drawing that line in the sand with the globalist, progressive federal government that we now have and have had for a very long time, really. It's Missouri House Bill 85. If you want to look it up, I would encourage you to do so, especially if you're in Missouri. For those of my fellow Missourians and Ozarkians, you certainly need to know about this one. But for everyone else, it wouldn't hurt to look it up also, and maybe even encourage people in your own state to get behind something like this. Missouri, a lot of you, maybe not a lot of you, but a lot of people seem to not realize just how patriotic, conservative, and more importantly, rebellious against authority, really, against the control, against the left that Missouri is. I think Missouri kind of it kind of lives in the shadows, and it likes the fact that most people don't really know about Missouri. They don't think about Missouri as the state to go to live this way, or the state to go to because of the really good laws that we have. Now, I'm not claiming we're the best. I'm not claiming that the laws are the best, but we are quite a free state compared to most other states. And Missouri has a very long history of kind of that rebellious attitude, going back to some of the first settlers that came into the state, that many of them were criminals, evading the law from out east when the Missouri Territory first opened up, going all the way through to the outlaw era and the Prohibition era, where Missouri, that's pretty much what the Ozarks was a hideout, one big hideout for Prohibition, which actually led up to the creation of stock car racing, if you look into the history of that. But anyways, before I get too far off my point, this bill, this House Bill 85, it's called the Second Amendment Preservation Act. And it essentially nullifies all federal gun laws within the state of Missouri, and it makes it illegal for the feds to come in and enforce those federal gun laws, and it makes it illegal for any state or local law enforcement within the state to enforce unconstitutional federal gun laws. It also forces any official, state official, sheriff, judge, whatever, that restricts or impedes upon a person's Second Amendment right. It forces them to pay that citizen a minimum of $50,000 for violating their constitutional rights. A lot of people would say, yeah, stuff like that gets proposed all the time by some, far right person. The far left does it too. Except it just passed the Missouri House by a vote of 103 to 43. And it not only passed, but it also received overwhelming support from Missouri sheriffs. And pretty much from my research, the only police department, law enforcement agencies that either completely opposed it or, said this, they were a little worried about this one, was law enforcement in large cities. But pretty much all of the small rural towns and counties supported this one. So it has a real good chance of getting through in the Senate and making it to the governor's desk. And, he's a fairly conservative governor, and probably not the most conservative. I mean, he's no governor of Florida, but I think there's a good chance that he would sign this bill also, especially if it passes with a good support in the Senate. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean if Missouri passes this law? I feel personally that it is a line drawn in the sand to the federal government saying, go ahead, try and cross that line. Because I, I think it would be, I think it's pretty much a guarantee that with the new administration, the Democrat-controlled Washington, they're going to try the best to push some pretty strict gun legislation through, and they're already doing it. Some of the legislation that's put through will be the absolute worst gun control legislation we've ever seen. And if that got passed, and then they came to Missouri and tried to enforce that in Missouri, and Missouri passes the Second Amendment Preservation Act, um, I mean, we've got the starting point of a civil war. It's almost like Fort Sumter all over again. So I think I think it's definitely something to take notice of. I understand that Texas is also trying to do their. They have one of their legislatures has proposed a secession. I have not kept up exactly on how much support that's gotten, but this bill has actually passed the Missouri House with a very large margin of support, which indicates that it has a chance to make it all the way to the governor's desk and into law. Here's the deal, and this is my gut feeling. I don't know this for a fact, but I have a little story that kind of backs up this opinion. I think that at least some of the legislatures in Missouri, they're probably doing this as a drawing a line in the sand. It's not so much of getting this passed so that it actually protects Missourians. I mean, I'm sure that's part of it, but they know in the back of their minds that the federal government is going to just run right over this law. The Supreme Court will probably overturn it. That if they pass, on a federal level, if they pass some kind of, draconian gun legislation or confiscation laws, the ATF and federal agencies are not going to abide by Missouri's Second Amendment Preservation Act. And it's going to create a situation where Missourians are, and the federal government is put in a position that they have to, either call someone's bluff or take it all the way and take it to arms against the other side. And I have a gut feeling that that is what's going on here in Missouri. And the reason why I say that, I had a conversation quite a while back with a state representative here in Missouri, one of the legislatures. And I'm not going to mention his name and tell you details, because when I talked to him, he knew, of course, that I had a YouTube channel, and he asked that our conversation be off the record. So I'm not going to tell you, he's told me as long as his names and details weren't mentioned, he would be okay with that, because it's just things that they're working on. He told me back then, and this was long before this current election. This has been, over 2 years ago that we had this conversation. It was a very lengthy conversation. And he said, the average person has absolutely no clue what the far left is doing, what their plans are, what they have in the works. He says, not just here in Missouri, but all over the U.S. He said, every day we are blown away by the things that we are hearing through the grapevine, through rumors, through other legislatures of what they are doing. He said they are planning an absolute far left communist progressive takeover of America. He said this isn't just your typical left right battle. He said these far left progressives, he said they have plans. He says they really want to radically change America. And remember, this was a couple of years ago. It almost sounds prophetic, seeing what's been going on over the last few months. He also told me, he said, a lot of us here in Missouri, he says, we've band together. He said, a lot of us politicians, the legislatures, he said, and we're not going to stand for it. He said, and at this point, we've decided we're going to try to push every bit of, conservative, pro-constitutional legislation through that we can. He said, because number one, we know that they're going to try to tear us down. He said, we know that they're going to try to, he said, they're doing things with He even said at that time with elections, he said they're doing things with, changing the maps on, who gets elected in what areas and stuff. He said so that it all plays into their right into their hands. He said that gives them more power. He said so we feel that we have only a small amount of time, a limited window of opportunity to get as much done as we can. He says, and we're going to try to force every bit of, very ultra conservative constitutional legislation that we can through to try to get as much on our side as we can. And he said to basically draw the line in the sand with them. He said, because we know it's coming. He says, we have to stop being on defense. And this was his words. He said, and this guy's a state legislature, but he's a former sheriff here in Missouri. And he said, far too long, we conservatives have been on the defense. He says, and we're constantly, trying to defend what we are doing, and we're very passive about how we engage in politics. And of course, we've seen that. I mean, that's why most of you have no use anymore for the Republican Party. It's why haven't been in the Republican Party for many years now, and don't even play their political game. He said, it's time that we go on the defense. He says, we have to start fighting back. He says, if we don't fight back right now in a political way, he said, there's another fight that's coming. He said, and if we don't fight that one, he said, we've lost completely. So I believe in my heart that this bill, that's one of the reasons it's in there, is so that in a way it's kind of drawing the line in the sand. The good thing is, the thing that makes me, puts a smile on my face, is that there are still good people in this country. There are still people willing to fight this battle a little bit more and possibly have a chance to overcome this globalist, progressive, communist left ideology that's just been crammed down everyone's throat. So here in Missouri, are we the battleground state? Are we the state that sets it off? It's quite possible. I know a lot of you, and I'm not putting down any states that you're from. My wife is from Texas. My wife lived most of her life in Texas. And if I got her on here right now, I know what she would tell you. She would say that it blew her away when she came to Missouri the first time, and all the time that she's been here, of how Missouri and Missourians are what people think Texans are. She said, people are way more conservative here, way more pro-gun here, way more anti-government here than she said I ever thought was possible. She said, I'm sad to, ashamed to say it, but they put us Texans to shame. Now, I'm not knocking any Texans, and I'm not knocking anyone else from any other state, but I'm telling you, there's a lot of people here in this state that are fed up with what's going on. So don't be surprised if in the future we don't start seeing more actions that could possibly lead us down the road to a civil war. I know in just my conversations with just people around here in my area, they're sick and tired of it. They're absolutely sick and tired of it. And it's not so much, there was a lot of support for Trump around here, but to be honest with you, a lot of them, complained that Trump didn't do enough. I haven't seen a whole lot of blind supporters of the former president. I just see a lot of people here that are absolutely fed up with the system. And here we now have this bill that I can't think of a bill in my life in any state that I'm aware of that draws that line so heavily in the sand between the state and the federal government. And, I've even seen other conservative commentators say, well, we like your efforts, with this bill, but we don't really think that it's going to be that effective. We think that the federal government will just say, well, you can't do that. Our laws supersede you, and too bad. Well, here's the thing. I may not be able to speak for every Missourian, but I know many in this area, and probably a lot where you live also, that if they try to pass these laws of confiscation or forcing you to register your ammunition, your gun, forcing you to get insurance policies, forcing you uh, to do all these other ridiculous things that are completely unconstitutional and immoral, uh, they're going to have a fight on their hands when they come out here in the countryside and the hills and the hollers. Uh, the first time some of those guys, those agents, pull up on someone's property and try to tell them that they can no longer legally have that firearm, um, there's going to be some problems. And part of me thinks that maybe the left is pushing for that also. They want that. They want to see this, to say, well, this is why we have to push through with these kinds of laws. This is why we have to have, psych evaluations to purchase a law. This is why we need these red flag gun laws. So either way, I just think that it's a kettle about ready to explode when it comes to the Second Amendment. I think Americans, and especially the very pro-gun, staunch conservative patriots in America, I feel that they've been pushed and pushed so far that they're in a corner right now, and we're going to have to make a decision. We're going to have to make this decision probably pretty soon. Are we going to just give up, raise the white flag, and lick the hands that feed us? Or are we going to make our final and last stand? I think that we're pretty much at that point right now. And it's very possible, folks, that you could see that last stand start here in Missouri. So anyways, I wanted to bring this to you because I think that this is quite an important piece of legislation, considering all the things that's happening right now that's moving this nation progressively to the left. And here in Missouri, we just passed by overwhelming numbers in our lower house the Second Amendment Preservation Act that essentially nullifies federal gun laws and says that the only gun laws that apply in the state of Missouri are Missouri gun laws. And look it up, and we don't have a lot. Our gun laws are pretty reasonable. So I think still too much, but considering the comparison, they're reasonable. All right, folks, let me know what you think. Let me know if you think that there is a possibility of a civil war and where you think it might start and how you think it might go. And until then, keep your powder dry. Catch you in the next video.